Hi, my name is Brad Hunter. I'm a Regina family law lawyer. I'm talking today with Charmaine Panko. Charmaine, could you introduce yourself and tell us a bit about yourself?
Yes, so I'm a collaboratively trained lawyer and mediator, and I'm very passionate about helping families transform their separation and divorce process so that it's one that can give them a solid foundation for success long into the future.
So let's just talk about whether people actually need a lawyer or need a collaborative process. Let's say in a situation where they're even having an amicable, like they're a friendly divorce, let's call it that. Is legal assistance needed?
There are a lot of decisions that you're going to need to make, even in an amicable divorce. So if you have children, you've got to figure out how are the decisions going to be made? What is that parenting schedule going to look like? What are even the logistics around having children that have two homes? There are a lot of decisions that you could sit down, just the two of you, and try to sort out, but then you might be left wondering, have you covered everything off? And so when you're working with lawyers, especially lawyers who have a lot of experience, as we do, we are already aware of some of the problems that people run into if they haven't, dealt with certain things. And that applies not just to parenting, that's property as well as your finances and figuring out what financial support is needed in each household.
So let's just talk about the kids. So if you have kids, do you have to get a document together? Are you expected to get a document together to discuss your future parenting?
There are no document police that come around to see, do you have this papered? But here's the thing, there can be future instances where without documentation, there's a third party, like take, for example, if you wanted to travel and you were needing to go across the border, somebody else isn't going to be able to just rely on you saying, oh, no, I have an agreement with the other parent. You're going to want to have this, and in fact, you're going to need to have it documented in those cases.
So is that what a parenting plan is?
Well, not really. I mean, a parenting plan gives you some guidance around what the day-to-day is going to look like. But within that parenting plan, there could be specific things like, for example, what are the parameters about travel, and who needs to give who notice, and what kind of information needs to be shared.
And what about things like what the
Exactly.
holidays are going to be? My experience is that people need to talk about decisions ahead of time. It's usually easier to make them than to have to deal with things like enrolling your kids in certain activities if you deal with it ahead of time. Is that fair?
That's fair to say. And I think anybody who's watching this video that is a parent, that things come up that are unexpected. And so even having in your parenting plan a protocol around how you're going to manage those unexpected things.
And to keep it from going off the rails, because it's a
Exactly.
living document that may need to rely on,
Exactly.
until your kids grow up, and even a little bit past that
Yeah.
sometimes. Let's just move on to money for a second. Let's talk about family property. So let's say a couple just um, says, well, you've got a house, some pensions, and can't we just do that ourselves? What are some of the complexities about, let's say the husband wants to keep the house? What are some of the complexities why you might need a lawyer?
Well, right off the bat, having a better understanding about what would be the value in that spouse keeping the house, what are the underlying interests that are being addressed? And is that actually the best outcome? Sometimes we think of an outcome, or we generate an option based on limited information. Maybe we've talked to somebody else who said, well, this is what I've done. So when you're working with experienced lawyers in a process that allows there to be discussion to really uncover those underlying interests, as well as thinking about what are all of the different options. Let's say in this instance, somebody still decides, yes, the husband's going to keep the house. Well, now we've got to figure out, if there's a mortgage, how is the refinancing of that mortgage going to occur, and what's going to be needed in terms of documentation. There's going to need to be some discussion about what we refer to as the equalization payment. And that's in light of not just the family home, but all of the family property. So gathering the documentation, making sure you have accurate values, and it's working with a team really to set out like a project plan. What are the different steps that we need to go through to get that plan implemented?
So is there much information, like just let's say, well, we've agreed we're going to split things equally. do they need a lot of information to even get that part of it done, documents and the like?
Mhm. Every situation is unique on its own facts, of course, and sometimes you need more information than other times. But you take some complex situations like where the family home had been previously owned, for example, and having some discussion about what kinds of documentation and information are you going to take into consideration. And here's what's really cool about utilizing the concierge collaborative process as opposed to just hiring a lawyer and asking a judge to figure it out, is that the judge is limited by the parameters of the legislation to take in the evidence and then apply the law and say this is what the outcome is going to be. In our process, of course, we can help the parties identify what documents that they want to bring into the process for consideration and canvass numerous options to get a satisfactory outcome that they both can have peace of mind on.
So we haven't talked about one thing, and that is support. And I understand there's, well, as I know, there's child support where everyone is expected to support their children, and there's spousal support. And again, even if a couple has do they have to pay child support? Is it one of those things that's expected if you want to get your divorce?
Yeah, so what's something that people don't realize is when you make an application to the court to be divorced, and that's actually the only place you can go and get that piece of paper that says you're divorced, is that the judge has an obligation under the Divorce Act to ensure that there's financial arrangements in place to take care of the children. And in Saskatchewan, what we've seen, or at least what I've seen, and I'm sure you've seen the same, Brad, is that our courts do look at that by reference to the federal child support guidelines. And so it's going to be really important, even if you were able to settle everything across your kitchen table from each other, that your documentation is all in order for the purposes of satisfying the courts that you have support in place in line with the federal child support guidelines so that you can end that spousal relationship, enabling you to move forward into your next chapter of your life as a divorced person.
So a couple that is, as I say, it's relatively amicable, and maybe they haven't decided anything, they still have a huge number of decisions to make. Is that right?
Absolutely, yeah.
And often they need to get a bunch of documents together. Is that right? And also, let's say one of them wants to buy the other out of the house. The bank pretty much expects them, before they'll do a mortgage or anything, to have a signed separation agreement.
That's correct, yes.
executed
And I
by
mean,
lawyers.
sometimes the bank won't even really want to talk to them until they are satisfied that an agreement has been reached.
So Charmaine, in a collaborative process, what would happen if a couple wanted to go forward and just get to the end of their divorce and finish everything? Is that something a collaborative process would be effective for?
Absolutely. And it really starts with having a meeting, right? Having a meeting where, say, you and your client and myself and my client, we're sitting down and we're saying, okay, well, what are the next steps and what information, what documents need to be gathered? Who's the most efficient person to gather this part of the list compared to the other part of the list, and really putting our collective energies and expertise together on getting towards that end result. Doesn't mean that we're putting our energies towards trying to resolve conflict. If you are having an amicable divorce and you really, you're always going to have some tensions because maybe you see things differently. But if you're pretty much on the same page, it's still a matter of a discussion about who does what, when, and what is needed in order to get to that outcome.
Charmaine Panko, thank you very much.
Thank you.